Val, and I'm hanging out on my back porch with my bromeliad friend because I want to tell you how to take care of these beautiful tropical beauties as houseplants. And why am I not doing this video indoors if I'm talking about houseplants? It's because it is so beautiful at the end of October. Today the light is great out here, and I just did a video about another plant that I grow outside that's commonly grown as a house plant, and that's aloe vera. So I thought, why not follow it up with the bromeliad? And these are two videos that I lost on those that memory card that disappeared. So time to do them again. Gotta pick yourself up and film again. Now mine do grow outdoors in my garden here year round, but I started out my horticultural career after college as an interior plantscaper, or I guess it would be an interior plantscape technician, I think is a term. It's a fancy term for someone who takes care of plants in offices and lobbies, malls, homes. And bromeliads were used quite often because they last long, and they're very hardy, whereas some of the other flowering plants needed to be replaced a lot more often. So I have maintained hundreds of them indoors, and I just want to share my experiences with you. Now, in terms of light, as bright an exposure as you can get, that's a little bit vague, I know, but without going into the details of foot candles, it would be something like a near a south window or a west window, but not actually in the window, because it's going to burn if it's up against the hot light. I mean the hot glass. So it needs that bright light to bring out the colors. A lot of the bromeliads have they've got a pattern in their leaves, and it also needs that light to flower and to puff. Now here's a good spot for my bromeliad indoors. I just wanted to show you in terms of light. It gets a lot of nice bright light out from this window here, and it's around 11 o'clock. It gets a lot of morning sun up until about noon or so. In the winter, however, I might have to move it in the dining room or the kitchen, because that's all the afternoon light, and they're the south light and the west light. So you might have to move it as the seasons change, but just remember, it's going to also help with to prevent the root rot, because you don't want the roots of this plant to rot out. And the more light it gets, the sooner it's going to dry out. Now, in terms of watering, what I would do is I would water the plant thoroughly about every month or two, depending on if it was drying out in the soil. And then I would put water in the cup here. This is called a cup, or you might hear it referred to as a tank. And because they are epiphytes in nature, they grow on other plants, they grow on rocks. Some of them grow on the forest floor. They are used to getting quite a bit of moisture, but then it rains and then it dries. So they don't stay really sopping damp. And indoors, you want to keep the tank or this reservoir here about maybe a quarter to half full. If it's full all the time and it's cooler and it's just not drying out, it can rot. And you also want to flush the water out in the middle here about every month, because it collects a lot of bacteria, and you don't want that collecting in there. And if you have excessive water or excessive minerals in your water, you might have to use distilled water, because bromeliads are really sensitive to this. Of course, rain water is the best, and that's how they prefer it. Of course, rainwater might be hard to come by for you to collect, so the distilled water is the next best option if you've got something going on with your water. So in terms of soil, they like something nice and rich, a lot of organic matter in it, because a lot of stuff falls from the trees above, and it'll catch in them or on them, so that's how they get their nutrients. They get their nutrients mainly from the air, unless they're growing on the floor. So a soil that drains really well, something like a Cymbidium orchid mix. It's got bark and sand, and it has a soil, it's a soilless mix, of course. I do, with mine, when I pot up mine, I do orchid bark and succulent mix and worm castings and organic compost. And that's a nice mix for it too, just something that doesn't hold too much water, but that is nice and rich. Oh, and another thing that you might want to add in the soil or look for it in a mix is coco coir. It is a more environmentally friendly alternative to peat moss. And bromeliads need little, if any, fertilizer. I just scatter some organic matter around mine every now and then. And when I say every now and then, about every year or two. Now the ones growing outdoors. You could use a balanced liquid houseplant fertilizer at like half strength, because remember, they are sensitive to salts, so you don't want them to burn, and they will get fertilizer burn. And you would just give them that fertilizer in the spring, and that would be just fine. And remember, never put any fertilizer in the tank, only plain water. They tolerate a wide range of temperatures. Here we were like about in the high 90s a few weeks ago, and we can get down in the 40s in the wintertime, so they can take that up and down just fine. This one is probably about 4 years old now. It started out as a single plant, and now it's pupped and it's a double plant. Just gorgeous. But the temperature isn't as much a concern as the humidity, because they are native to the tropical areas and some of the subtropics. So if your home is too dry, you might want to grow them in a tray of pebbles with some water in it, just to get a little moisture, or just spray them every now and then, especially in the winter time when the heat gets turned on. It tends to be drier. And mine have never gotten any kind of insects at all, but indoors you might get mealybug and or scale. Do not use an oil spray. They don't like an oil spray. You can either just take a cotton ball or a Q-tip and dip it in alcohol and swab the insect off, or with a scale you can just scrape it off with your finger or a knife. And mealybug looks like cotton, and scale looks like a dark pinhead. Now this is a Neurogelia, so the flowers are actually tiny blue flowers inside the tank here, or the cup. They're fairly insignificant because you've got to look down into it. But something like the Guzmanias or the Acameas, they have a flower stalk. And after the flower stalk dies, just completely cut it all the way off. And that plant might eventually die. They normally do after they flower, but a pup will appear. And then when the pup is about a quarter of a size of the mother plant, sometimes smaller, you just want to get enough of it so that it has enough of a chance to grow. And then you can plant that. But in terms of pruning, there's not that much to be done with them. There's just sometimes some dead leaves underneath, but otherwise they are pretty easy. Now the Neurogelias are my favorite because they've got the patterned leaves, and they come in all different kind of splashy things. As you can see, this one has a little bit more red, this one has green. It's the same plant. The Acmeas that I was talking about, they are gray foliage, and then it has a pink flower. And the Guzmanias, they look a little bit more like Cymbidium orchid foliage, longer, narrow, just green foliage, and it has a flower that's usually in pink, yellow, orange, or red. And those actually get the flower, but I don't think the foliage is as interesting in my opinion. So these are the ones that I like. Oh, and also the other one that I've done a blog post about and a video, I will leave the link for you down below, is the pink quill plant or the Tillandsia cyanea. That is in the bromeliad family too. And in terms of repotting, you don't have to do it too often because they have a pretty small root system. So maybe every 4 years or 5 years, depending on how it's growing. If it's getting really big, like this one is in a fairly small pot and it's really heavy, you might have to pot it up just to get it to anchor down, but otherwise they enjoy being pot bound. And I just want to clarify that and say they don't like being pot bound forever, but they like being tight in their pots. So I hope you have found this video about growing bromeliads indoors to be helpful. And please subscribe because I have a lot more gardening videos, both outdoor gardening and indoor gardening, along with a little bit of crafting coming your way. Thanks so much for all your comments and your likes. I really appreciate them. So let's get into the indoor or the outdoor garden and make the world a more beautiful place. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.